a guy that the Gators got from the NFL is now full-time on the staff, and that is Russ Callaway, who has been promoted to tight ends coach, although that has not, as of Thursday afternoon, been officially announced by the Gators yet, but it has been reported by On3 and GatorsOnline.
They better get to reporting it, or we better be right. If not, then as you'll see today at practice, Zach, there are major NCAA violations going on because Russ was an analyst, which means he can't lead practice or be coaching in the practice. And as you can see right there, very much so coaching.
Yeah, he's I think that's obviously this is something that I think Billy, honestly, man, is kind of becoming a little bit of a trend. And obviously you see this with other coaches too, but the opportunity that he's given guys that he's now hiring and working with a chance to move up, a chance to start, within his program at whatever kind of entry position and get opportunities to either get promoted, to get more responsibilities, or to get something like this where you actually get a really higher up raise. We saw obviously what happened with Corey Raymond and him putting more on his plate. We saw Austin Armstrong, a guy that started out as a graduate assistant with Billy, then comes on as a position coach. Now he's made him a defensive coordinator at 29 years old. We saw the belief that he had in Patrick Toney, kind of giving him coordinator responsibilities at such a young age. I mean, this is a guy who really believes in the coaches that he hires. And when they have opportunities, if they put in their time and they've earned the job, he doesn't hesitate to go hire a young guy. And I think now to say all that, I'm not saying that to say that Russ is not at a point necessarily where he's earned this. I mean, you're talking about a dude that's coaching the NFL, that's been an offensive coordinator, worked at Alabama, worked at LSU. He is a younger guy, per se, but this is someone that's clearly going to be able to come in, and I think as a tight ends coach and with his background, I think he's certainly going to be able to recruit. And you already heard some of the reaction on social media, or saw, should I say, from players on the team and some of the guys who know this coach. They like to hire. So I think it was important for Billy to make it because now you've got Austin in place, and now you've got your tight ends coach, and you're really down just one assistant. But with David coaching the receivers, he's been working with that group for over a year now.
Yeah, and kind of like Armstrong, Austin Armstrong, with being the defensive coordinator coming in late, he's someone who was a graduate assistant, graduate coach under Patrick Toney and Billy Napier at University of Louisiana, or at UL. So the language, the verbiage is there. Russ, the language, the verbiage is there, even though he was a defensive analyst. And I think it's very good and healthy. I've talked to several coaches about this. I think I don't remember if it was Jeff Collins or might even been Will Muschamp saying, "I wish that somebody had made me coach offense." You just become a better, more well-rounded coach, as a defensive analyst. You're watching defensive stuff, even if you're a former quarterback.
Yeah, well, remember Garrick McGee, before he became Florida's quarterback coach, was a defensive analyst on Mullen's staff because he'd been an offensive assistant his whole career, and they wanted that expertise in that role.
And a lot of those, it's like Russ was a defensive analyst, and a lot of what they will do is watch offensive film and then help explain, this is what the offense is trying to do while you're a defensive line analyst. Hey, this is the scheme that this offensive line is doing, and this is what they're trying to get out of this play. And it's just a different perspective than just the defensive line coach yelling at you that, hey, your hand placement sucked. It gets a little more technical. But I think Russ is a good coach. Certainly has a great track record. You got a Nick Saban stamp of approval. You got a Kirby Smart stamp of approval. And you had an NFL stamp of approval as well. So tight end coach is a position where I don't think you're not – it's tough because you obviously want to be a good on-field coach, but I think you're going to make your money as a tight end coach recruiting. I don't think Tim Brewster made Antonio Gates a significantly better tight end. I don't think he made Nick O'Leary a significantly better tight end. But Tim Brewster went and got Dalvin Cook to come to Florida State. And Tim Brewster went and got a slew of guys to come to play, whether it was his position or not. So I think Russ is going to have to show us a lot. What kind of relationships is he forming on the recruiting trail, and who can he get to come and make the team better, whether it's his position room or a different position room?
Yeah, and also helps too that he's a guy that's obviously been on the staff, been here the past year, so that's kind of a seamless transition. And then obviously Austin's coming in as a new guy, as a DC, but has worked with Tony, worked with Patrick, basically speaking the same language as you mentioned, Nick. So not ideal to be having these coaching transitions right before spring ball. But the fact that you're going to make things as normal and familiar for the players as you possibly can, I think that's going to be beneficial. And again, you've got David working with the wide receivers, who's been there this whole time with Kerry. So that's given those guys a familiar face every time that they show up to practice. But we still got to find out who the wide receivers coach is going to be, Nick. And obviously, the guy that's coaching right now could have a chance to potentially get promoted, but there's so many candidates out there. There's so much potential hires that Billy could make that it looks like, it appears at least, that he's certainly going to take his time and make the hire that he feels is the best.
Yeah. And listen, at this point, you're not going to just make, and I think I'd said it before on the pod, but or on the show, but you're not going to make a hire just to make it and then have to make a fire and a change, on April 15th, on the Saturday after your game. David Doker?
Yep.
David Doker has led the first two practices. He'll lead the third today. Florida, and it's not for, a lack of trying. They're not being complacent. We reported 2 weeks ago now, or a week ago now, that Florida had interviewed over Zoom, had interviewed 7 candidates. Then they brought in several of those candidates to practice, who were there on campus for in-person interviews and to watch practice.
Nick saw him.
I seen them. Billy's just being cautious. And I think he wants to, or not cautious, just being diligent in a background check and seeing if you fit in with the coaches. Hey, you watched a practice. What are your thoughts on this? How would you have done this? What do you think about the way we run things? And you're trying to find a right fit. To me now, sitting here on March 9th, as the Gators are getting ready for the third practice, it's clear that you're not in a rush. And I thought they would have a hire this week. I'm not so sure if they will right now. And this is a situation which is keeping us up and on the phones. And from a writer standpoint, would just love for them to make a hire and save me and you some phone calls on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and again, there's the potential, like we mentioned for David Doker. I wouldn't put it past Billy to give him this opportunity, especially if he earns it in the spring. But this is a guy that was a wide receiver at Louisiana. He spent 3 seasons on Billy's staff. Started out as a quality control coach, working with the receivers, his former position. So, now he's come over and spent time as a wide receivers graduate assistant. Was actually recently named to the 30 under 30 list for the class of 23 by our coaching network in February 2023. So if you remember, Kerry Colbert, right before he left, Nick, kind of shared that news about David and kind of gave him a stamp saying this guy's a star, a rising star. So again, would not put it past him to potentially earn that job this spring if Billy doesn't find a candidate that he feels like would be more qualified or a better fit than David would. And then there's also the potential of maybe Eric Kaisaw, the former Auburn OC, who has been a wide receiver coach for several years throughout his career. Actually, has only recently coached quarterbacks at Boise State and Auburn, but for the majority of his career has been a wide receivers coach. So he's another option. But between David and Billy being a former wide receivers coach, and I think the system that they have in place, I don't think it is in any way whatsoever going to hurt the Gators at wide receiver this spring if they don't have a full-time position coach in place. Now, if you didn't have David, it would. Absolutely. So, kudos to him for stepping up, and I'm sure this is going to help him get a full-time job down the road if it's not at Florida.